Hi there, and welcome to Prices at the Pumps on SaltWire, our weekly look at everything energy related. I'm Scott Squires, pleased to be joined by the energy expert Dan McDagg. Dan, because of travel, we had to move Wednesday's edition to today, Thursday. Newfoundland and Labrador has already set their price, a big jump. What can you tell us about that? And then what can you tell us about what the rest of Atlantic Canada can expect at the pumps on tomorrow?
Well, look, we did see that pretty big jump in Newfoundland, but for only gasoline. And mysteriously, the PUB there only saw a 4-cent decrease for diesel. In fact, markets are showing a 4-cent increase. So great news on the diesel front, terrible news on the gasoline side. But it has to do with the fact that on April 16th, we shift from winter to summer gasoline. You and I have been talking about this for quite some time. That's usually about a 7 to 10 cent increase, and it looks like that's exactly what happened for Newfoundland. And there may be a little bit more because they didn't go to the full number. So now $1.90 for a liter of gasoline in Newfoundland, and for gasoline itself, diesel a little bit below the $2 mark, which is nice. But it does suggest that this is really the start of the $2 a liter reality in Atlantic Canada. Now, the rest of Atlantic Canada will see net about a 2-cent a liter increase. But if they decide to jump the gun and get ahead of the April 16th change, which would happen before next Friday, then you could see a scenario where every province, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, and of course PEI will see a net increase of about 8 cents a liter. Unpleasant as that may be, that tends to be the reality. Better to gas up today in the hope that you can get ahead of that, because tomorrow it could be a very, very big surprise for a lot. Diesel, of course, should be going up about 3 cents a liter in all those provinces. Again, I'm scratching my head as to why the PUB in Newfoundland dropped diesel prices when, in fact, there isn't a single day this week where diesel prices in the market didn't go higher than the average of last week.
Dan, we've talked about $2 a liter gas. I remember way back when it hit $1, that kind of threshold of, oh my gosh, we've hit $1. And with a couple of exceptions, it never really went back. Is that what's going to happen in your mind with $2 when we kind of cross that threshold across the country, that we may never go back below that, maybe from time to time, but $2 and above could be our new reality? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's going to be the new normal for the summer. I'm not so sure it'll hold come spring, come fall, when we see the prices drop as a result of the switch back from summer blends, which are more expensive to make, to winter blends. But the reality is that oil is going to continue to hold above $85 a barrel for WTI and above $90 a barrel for Brent, mostly due to the fact that there is increasingly a grave concern that the world is falling behind in terms of production. So does $2 a liter remain? Yes, for summer, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to continue into the new year. But the days of $1.30, $1.40, you can wave goodbye. They're not coming back. Certainly, with the federal government helping itself to an ever-increasing amount of carbon taxes, both the first carbon tax, which, as we know, is 17.61 cents a liter plus HST, and the second carbon tax, which is going to make its way to about 19 cents a liter plus HST by 2030. So every scenario you look at, unless something dramatic should change at the federal level, look for prices to be sustained. And it doesn't help, Scott, that we have an ever weakening Canadian dollar, which lost another penny in value. That's good enough for about a half a penny to a penny increase. So we don't have the protection of the loonie anymore, the petro loonie. So we're paying an extra 25 cents a liter, a hidden tax, if you will.
And then I referenced your travel day yesterday. Where are you, and what can you tell us about what you're doing there?
Well, I'm at a conference called Canada Strong and Free. Organization that's been around and known as the Manning Institute. A lot of conservatives here, but a lot of people from across the country participating in what is a grave concern about the cost of affordability crisis on energy and the connection between the two. I'm hosting a panel in about an hour and another panel after that on the issue of taxes. Do not need to be, so tech, not taxes, and looking at the overall impact that net zero policies are going to have on Canadians and around the world as we allow the view that there's a climate emergency to provide policies that the world simply cannot afford, and for which we might actually be taking a step backwards when you consider the impact of renewables, the pursuit of renewables, mining, and other things, and how damaging that will be to the environment in of itself, very ironically. So that's what we're doing this week, and I'm here to discuss the energy angle. Not as a partisan, as you know, I was a Liberal MP for 18 years, never joined another party since. So, kind of going to be a bit of a, the proverbial hen in the fox house.
Yeah, before we started chatting, you were mentioning that you had a chance to speak to New Brunswick Premier Blaine Higgs. One of the premiers in Atlantic Canada has been pushing back against the federal carbon tax. What can you tell us about some of the points of the discussion with Premier Higgs?
Well, I won't get into what we talked about, but I think, like anyone else, the concern about energy is certainly paramount. In a province like New Brunswick, which has a lot of natural gas, a province like New Brunswick, which had the potential for energy east, a province where, on either side of the border with the U.S., there's a difference of some 50 cents a liter. That's pretty substantial. And I think a better discussion has to be had at some point down the road when I meet, and I've met other premiers as well, to discuss with them the growing obvious concern that Canadians are having, especially in border communities, between that the disparity in price, especially when you consider that a lot of the gasoline in places like Calais, Maine, may actually be made at the Irving plant in St. John. So we're being held to a higher price, and they're not. But again, as you and I have discussed, the value of the Canadian dollar adds 25 cents a liter in loss to Canadian purchase power. The extra taxes, 28 cents a liter alone in places like Nova Scotia, between the two carbon taxes, 28 cents a liter. Those things tend to make up the big difference that we see between, U.S. gas prices and Canadian gas prices, even though that gasoline is produced right here in Canada.
I know you got to go shortly, Dan, but last one before we wrap up here. I just got back from a driving trip to Montreal. I was there for a couple of days. And what struck me driving across the province is, depending on the gas station, the community, the location, I was paying as low as $1.59 and as high as $1.70, $1.71, depending on where you were and what station. Why is it like that in Quebec? And why isn't it like that here in Nova Scotia, where, hey, if I knew that I could drive 10 minutes and pay 7 cents a liter less, I would. But it's not that way here. But why is it like that in Quebec?
Yeah, well, Quebec has had for about 10 years now a policy of ensuring that its gas price, as far as taxation is concerned, reflects the cross-border. We see this here in Ottawa across as Hull, Gatineau, where the price of gasoline is often very competitive with Ottawa, even though we know gas taxes are about 10, 12 cents a liter more expensive in Quebec. So all along the border around Quebec, where there is competition, where the prices are lower, gas stations are permitted to sell fuel for less. They collect obviously less tax and are able to be competitive. The other factor, of course, is that there is a big difference in taxation on carbon taxes. Quebec has a cap and trade of 12 cents a liter, 12.5 cents a liter. Maritimes, Atlantic Canada, and the rest of Canada pay a carbon tax of 17.61. So you can see where there are starting to become advantages in a province that doesn't have a lot of oil or gas, and basically rejects any idea of having pipelines, somehow getting advantage. I think it's a pretty big issue as far as concerns the country has, that some people are doing much better than others.
Dan, I know you've got to move off, so you got a busy day. Appreciate you taking time to be with us here on Prices at the Pumps and SaltWire. But when you're not with us here hanging out and talking energy, where else can people connect with you and find you and chat?
Yeah, well, look me up on, my email, president@affordableenergy.ca, or info@affordableenergy.ca, affordableenergy.ca, the website, and of course, gas price prediction at gaswizard.ca, and have a little bit of fun with me on Twitter when I get back to normal, on X, if you will, Gas Price Wizard.
Well, Dan, again, appreciate your time. Enjoy the rest of your day. I know it's a busy agenda for you, but you know that come next week on Prices at the Pumps, I'm going to ask you all about some of the things that you experienced during your time there, speaking to the folks that you're having the opportunity to address. And we'll do that next week if that fits okay with you.
That works. Looking forward to it, Scott.
Be well, Dan. Thank you.
Thank you, Scott.